Hello and welcome to this special Construction News webinar. I'm Robin Latcham. Until recently I was editor of one of Construction News' sister titles, Materials Recycling World. Now today, in partnership with Reconomy, we're considering the smarter management of waste materials in the construction industry. More specifically, we're looking at how digital solutions can offer market-leading opportunities that make both business sense as well as being environmentally responsible. Today, we're considering those practical measures and tools to drive both sustainability and productivity for those who are commissioning sites, the contractors and their supply chains. We're also going to be considering the barriers faced by those adopting new ways of working and how they can be overcome to develop the sites of tomorrow. But first, I'm going to invite the members of the panel to introduce themselves and say briefly what they're hoping for today. So, Matt, if you kick us off.
So hello, and I'm Matt Nichols. I'm a Divisional Director for Reconomy. Reconomy is the UK's largest waste management business focusing on construction. We've been pressing the digitisation case for some time via our portal, which is industry leading. We're keen to discuss with the other panellists and the viewers the opportunities to take that further within the industry generally.
Thank you very much. Eva?
Hi everyone, I'm Eva Genaku. I'm the Sustainability Director for Multiplex. Multiplex is a principal contractor in construction, for those that don't know us. We primarily build skyscrapers, big hospitals and education facilities. We've been on this journey on digitalization and waste for about 9 years now, and we definitely have a big drive on digital and innovation in general within Multiplex, so I'm really pleased to be here today with you.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Graham Edgell. I'm the Group Procurement and Sustainability Director for Morgan Sindall Group. We're a regeneration and construction business that turns over about 3 billion. I'm also a director of the Supply Chain Sustainability Score. Looking forward to discussing how we can better collaborate to improve the performance of the industry.
Simon?
Hi, Simon Hart from Innovate UK. I work for the Innovate UK is the UK government's innovation agency, and I specialise on the Transforming Construction programme, and that's an Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund programme, and it's predominantly there to help shift the industry towards more digital and efficient ways of working, such as prefabrication and off-site manufacturing.
And it's still quite early days on that. You've only recently kicked it off.
It is, that's right, yes. In fact, we're looking forward to some announcements in the next couple of weeks around the programme and releasing some new funding from that next year.
Yeah, and the money's pretty substantial, actually.
Absolutely, yeah. There's up to £30 million worth of R&D money coming through that programme, and the total programme is worth around £170 million.
Right, well, there's an incentive to start off with. But I don't think I'm being unfair. The construction industry doesn't have a fantastic record in terms of its waste management and loss of materials into the ether. At the sharp end, is that something that you agree with?
I think the reality of that is it's true. I think the construction industry is conservative generally. But if you look specifically at waste, then there's a lot more to be done. There's opportunities that we could work on, and I think the reality of that is some of it requires a consistent approach, or a more consistent approach. And there are opportunities, there are programs, if you like, that are being targeted currently that could lead to that. But hopefully activities like today can put the spotlight on those and help people to get on board.
So there you are, the two people day-to-day job is in the heart of the industry that could do better.
Can I slightly disagree, even though I agree with most of what you said? Can I slightly disagree on the fact that construction is conservative? I wouldn't say construction is conservative. I would say construction is probably such a high-risk industry that we don't want to be taking any extra risks. We are like an open-air, fully visible and transparent manufacturing site in the middle of cities, and we often don't have full control of the product, in the sense that our clients keep evolving probably the product, what it's going to look like, who is going to occupy it. So there are often last-minute changes to things that could have a lead-on time of from several weeks to several months. So I'm definitely hoping that digital is going to help us control those risks and the efficiency of materials a little bit better.
To what extent, though, for example, if you've got narrow margins, it actually stops you taking risk? If you're not awash with the money to take those risks and to take that gamble, you won't do that risk as a first.
True.
That's conservative.
Is it a risk or is it an opportunity? I'd like to think it is an opportunity. Because of the very high risk, we should be looking and investing and planning ahead based on our current experience and historical data and our personal experiences in construction, how we can better manage resources so they don't become waste in the first place. But also any unavoidable waste, how we can make best use of those so they don't maybe remain waste but can be reused, recycled if necessary, and so on.
I think that's a fair point, and I think partially to enable you to make those decisions as to how to move forward, the key is to know where you are now. And that waste data is absolutely essential, and the accuracy and consistency of that data is absolutely essential. And one of the industry issues at the moment is that data isn't consistent and it isn't accurate.
We'll come on to some of the key questions, and obviously these are barriers as well. Graham, day-to-day job, is it fair to say could do better?
I think we've made massive strides in the last 10 years, but I think that we've actually, and this is why it's very timely today, we've reached a bit of a watershed where the time has come for us to take the next steps to actually drive on. And Matt's absolutely correct, and Eva made some good points. But if we can't, what we have got to do is get the data right, and so that we actually know what we're dealing with and how we can share that data as an industry, because we're all mobile factories, which was Eva's point, and they're all different factories. And so what we need to do is to share and use the digital space to actually make us more efficient. So,
Simon, how are you going to bring your money and your interest and obviously a praiseworthy enthusiasm, I should say, from the government department and the government that's backing it, against that sort of challenge of being quite a mixed and varied and all sorts of other risk and difficulties?
Of course. The programme that I'm part of is linked to the Transforming Infrastructure Productivity Strategy. And that was the strategy launched last year, which saw 5 government departments adopt the presumption in favour of off-site manufacturing. And that is also linked through to the adoption of the BIM Level 2 standards and what we hope to be the future standards around long-term asset management and asset performance. And what this approach is really from a central government perspective. If you have 5 large departments all buying infrastructure, all buying physical buildings, what the strategy proposes to do is to commonise components and subsections of those buildings, so that you can use the power of government procurement to enable the construction industry to shift towards a more manufacturing-based approach. So if we know that over the next 10 years there's going to be 1 million door panels bought, it allows us to manufacture those to a specification, but to allow the supply chain to manufacture those according to their own methods and best practices. As long as it meets that final specification, then there is a supply chain to supply into. And by doing that, by shifting, essentially taking that factory, that manufacturing site, and putting it inside a controlled environment, much the way the automotive industry does and the aerospace industry, you can drive out waste from that process. I think a lot of the waste that we struggle with now is that there's a lot of bespoke activity takes place on site. Although following processes, it's not following common designs. And that leads to a lot of uncontrolled areas on the construction side. What we hope to do with the funding that's coming in from the central government funding through research and innovation is really to help those businesses to adapt to that new way of working. But it's a 4-year programme, and there's a considerable way to go to get to that point. But we're very keen to see businesses to get involved in this.
4 years is a relatively short time, actually. It's to get yourself together. So can the industry respond if it doesn't have centralised data, it doesn't know what it's got out there, to be able to to feed all this thing, or how many doors it's going to be using?
I think modern methods of construction, off-site manufacturing, will help in this process, but it isn't a panacea, and I think we just got to be careful, about realistically what it can be achieved, because there are other complications related to MMC and off-site manufacturing. The ability to get more consistency into our data in the way we currently build our projects, etc. I think there's great opportunity to do that. So if you look at the waste data from our perspective, we've been capturing that on our portal digitally for a long time, and our clients have been receiving that information digitally. We are developing interfaces, which I think is a key part of this now, so that we can interface directly into our supplier systems. What we've identified is that there are 2 or 3 key systems that the majority of our waste providers, our waste collectors, are utilising. So Big Change and Midsoft, for example, as 2 of the major ones. So we're developing interfaces that enable our orders to be placed directly into the transport systems of those businesses, and also for their information to come directly back into our portal. Right? So that gets you that consistency. It ensures that the data is coming in a consistent format, and it enables our clients then to receive it in that same consistent format. We're also interfacing with the likes of BRE and Smart Waste, etc., etc. So there's some of the opportunities, and I think if we can get enough people of the major construction companies involved in this, then you can drive that consistency. And once you've got that consistency, it gives you the visibility of, so how many doors do we need? How much waste are we generating on different construction sites in total, in a geographical area? All of those things are possible, but you've got to get the systems and the data right in the first place. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Simple as that.
I mean, Ava, you talked about being in the middle of a process, maybe further than the middle, but you're in the process of really trying to address your waste management, and if you can't measure it, you can't deal with it. Well, can you perhaps talk about Multiplex's experience in this area?
So our journey so far has been to absolutely make everything digital. So when I first joined, we had a smallish number of very large projects. So as it was just one of me, and I had quite an interest in waste, I decided the only way is digital. So all the data is live. We started utilizing the software, one of the softwares that you mentioned, the BRE's Smart Waste, which we've since expanded into other areas of like energy and water and other environmental parameters that we are monitoring. But that digitalization definitely enables you to have a live view of what's happening in the whole company, trends, see where you need to put your emphasis in, and allows the interfaces that you mentioned, Matt. And I think this is really important to now take us to the new era, where we have all the inputs digitally. And there are many more opportunities for utilizing current and future technologies for further improvements in waste efficiency.
Does it make much difference to you that your company has very large, significant projects on a single site, for example, and therefore the management of what's going on is more straightforward? Because I can imagine for some businesses with disparate businesses, different sites everywhere, that's a very deep and wide management control. You don't really face that challenge at this stage.
We do, and I think the answer again is technology and pre-planning how you're going to view your data, so you can make these comparisons or differentiations potentially in the data. Otherwise, if you have it in piece of paper or Excel, however great these are, they don't allow you to slice the data in the different manners that you mentioned just now would be necessary for a larger operation.
Graham, is it the day-to-day
for us? Well, with over 500 live sites at any one time, and different sizes, and if you look at the built environment as well, where the the maintenance and property services business are also big contributors to the waste environment. I think the big step we are at the moment is starting to share the data with the bigger site people, with the guys, so that we can do it in a territorial fashion, so that we can make a difference to head towards refining the digital information. So I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but I think if we
within the companies, you're talking about defining it so everybody's talking the same language around what.
Well, in the industry, I think that we're involved in guiding a couple of projects at the moment, and taking one London borough, for instance, and saying, well, everybody who's in construction in that borough, as far down as we can go, see if we can share the data. See how then we can logistically make it more possible and feasible to do it, and not cause cost, but to reduce carbon, all sorts of other things in the contributory function. Because at the moment, trying to do it in an insular basis, I think we've all bumped into the same wall, which is why we need to get the digitisation platforms in place. Make it free, so the medium-sized builder can go onto freemium or one of the other systems and say, it doesn't cost me anything, but I've posted my profile that people can then look at and say, right, is there any intrinsic value so that the recycling machine can start to actually pop in? Or is it waste that we need to actually say, to take Simon's point, which is a good one, where we can start to demand plan better and reduce the waste that comes out?
So the question is, how is the London Council doing in response to your...
Well, we're only just starting, so it's part of the Mayor's Climate Leaders Group. And the supply chain school have got involved. We've got 78 partners, and so the idea really is to try and start to share that data and speak to the companies who think that there are intrinsic valued materials in there, and then try and deal with the ones that we can't. So single-use plastics, which I know is very topical, but none of us in the industry really know what to do about it. So, but we can, because we become a critical mass if we all join together.
Well, it is big because it's second only to the packaging industry for use of plastic. So there's a heck of a material there that, of different sorts, to exploit. Because some plastics do have value. The single-use ones are challenging, but
if we all got together and said to the big logistics distributors, the merchants, have said, well, in this area territory, we're not going to accept. Or if Morgan Sindall said, for instance, we're not going to sit. We buy 40 million bricks a year, and they're all shrink wrapped. Well, if we got together with Persimmon, Barratt, and the other big house builders, maybe, then we would influence the brick manufacturers.
That's got to be another way. There's got to be another way. And collaboration, I would say, is definitely the only way, and the most efficient way.
You both have sustainability in your titles, in fact. Probably not the most common. Maybe in the bigger companies, but certainly somebody wouldn't necessarily have it in their job description commonly, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, we've moved on a little bit now that we changed from sustainability into a responsible business. And it's to try and drive to make a drumbeat to become a heartbeat with our people, so that they all join in to participate and not do what construction normally does, which is to say, well, we're okay over here, and not share and collaborate best practice. So, yeah, I think, and in fairness to Eva, I think it's good that the industry is actually recognising it.
Simon, do you see any particular challenges around this idea that maybe groups will be having all their own data, which they're really working hard on to make work and to produce value, and we've had 2 or 3 examples already, but there'll be lawyers who say, well, we're not, why are we giving them this information? It's worth money. There'll be contractual obligations that put protection against risk ahead of the importance of the benefits of sharing something, because it's a bit blue cloud, it's a bit out there. So that's a role that I think government can easily play.
Potentially, yes. I mean, a good example of where there's some work going on in this area is around the Project 13, run by the Infrastructure Clients Group. Now they're working around the model of shifting the business relationship from transactional relationship to an enterprise relationship. So when clients, end customers, contractors and all parts of the supply chain working on a project. They're grouped together as an enterprise, fully collaboratively, and even to the point where the names of those individuals or the role names are different to what you would use on a typical site, and that's done deliberately to try and shift the model. When those projects can be demonstrated, and there are active demonstrations happening now, that use case can then be translated into other sections of the industry. Construction tends to work very much on demonstration. Yes, we are a very risk-averse industry because of the risks involved in managing a construction site and a project. But when it can be successfully demonstrated on another program, that's typically the best way to get it through the legal guys and through the procurement guys. They can see, okay, so who else has done this and tried it and proven it? You can show them an example. That's also where some of the activity through the government programs and through our Transforming Construction program should help to demonstrate new ways of working and new ways of operating sites and programs. And again, that comes back to the need to demonstrate to the industry that there is the ability, the will, and the success from transforming to a new model. But coming back to some of the information, what you mentioned about collaboration and how you can drive some of the risk out of the industry. A lot of the early startup community will absolutely thrive if they know that there is a pipeline of supply of something. Whether it's a raw material, whether it's access to a certain amount of information. And the new generation of startups absolutely thrive on data. And I think if you can give them to data and the access of where that information is, there's a strong potential you'll get a startup coming who will create a business model to thrive in that environment. But we've got to get the data first.
Interesting. It's an interesting point you made, though. So if you look at trying to identify those projects that have done an exceptional job and use those as the benchmark to say, okay, so why was that so exceptional and how could we replicate that elsewhere? So if you take site waste management plans as an example, so no longer mandatory, but the vast majority of tier 1 contractors, the major house builders, all use them because it's recognised as best practice. For me, taking a site waste management plan and developing it further to really understand how it was determined that what amount of waste was going to be generated, how was that minimised, and what happened to the waste that was generated, and how was it recycled, reused, etc. There's some real learning in there, which I don't think we as an industry take advantage of. Each site waste management plan is done individually for a project, in my experience. Yeah? So if you can, our site waste management plans, for example, are held on our portal digitally. If you can interface that, and I'm not an expert on BIM, but logically for me, if you can interface that into BIM information and data, isn't there an opportunity then to take that and say, okay, when we're doing a project of a similar size and a similar build style, how could we replicate that site waste management plan? There's something in that for me, which probably worth exploring.
It's a fragmented industry, though, Matt. 85% of the tier 1's subcontractors are SMEs, and therefore you do need to take those earlier steps now, which is, and I keep going back to the fact that you need to actually put a wrap around it some way, whether it's territorial geography. Because to recycle and to identify intrinsic value for the new startup, it's got to be consistent. And because some areas of the United Kingdom do not have any landfill and it's being moved so quickly, we need to go right back to the infrastructure of how it's put together. And I think that the big tier 1s in construction have an obligation now to start to share the data.
Within a geographic region is what you're saying, is initially, because therefore waste managers can be probably involved just as readily as well, because they will have relevant infrastructure across a region, like they own landfill sites.
Yeah, or take Graham's point, if you work on a specific geography, from our perspective, we could ensure that the geography selected was those that we'd got the interfaces directly with the service providers. So then you know you've got control of the data and you've got access to the data in a consistent fashion that you can be confident of the accuracy of it. So I think the geography thing is about making it a manageable task rather than just trying to boil the ocean, as it were.
But it actually supports what Simon said, which is to enable to demonstrate by best practice. So if you take a geographical area and prove certain points of the benefit and what it does for your reputational capital with the community, and takes away the risk that Eva talked about earlier, I think it's the place to start.
Where are the big gains, do you think, early on? Because I mean, it is still very early days, and you can talk about let's do load more reuse or whatever. But in the short term, cutting the bills you're paying, Matt and others to take it away is a good start. But where do you think we should be aiming for? Because we're still very low at ground level, aren't we, in terms of?
I think we should be aiming to what is now called the circular economy, and I know this is a discussion about waste, but I'm hoping that we are all talking about unavoidable waste, if you like, because we should definitely, and with the help of BIM, which I have in my mind as a very big library of information, try and follow the money, essentially, and follow the material from its either inception or design and procurement, down to the material arriving or the product arriving to site, and then trying to follow it through and then see what actually happens to it. Because I think there is a bit of a gap in our exact understanding of exactly how this wastage came about. I think we can guess and we can estimate, but unless we, with the help of technology now, because I know it's really hard, try and pinpoint exactly what is that process that is causing the waste and try and go back and correct the process. But we will need much more technology to follow things around. And I think
we need to get to the client then, because the gestation period for a construction job, and you can listen to various opinions, but can be up to 7 years. The contractor normally gets 4 weeks to price it and then start next Monday. And therefore, the demand planning piece is in a completely different place, which is why I think that we do need to get back to real basics. And we've got all the platforms that we can select from and start to build from there, because the demand planning thing will then spring back into the frame when we can. But I think the urgent button has been pressed. We need to do things now.
Who is going to agree what that basic data framework should be, though? Does it have to be directed from the centre, from policymakers?
I don't think that will. Well, it needs to be, because construction does react to legislation immediately. But I think that the tier one contractors would be prepared to take the responsibility. And I just think there are quite a few initiatives now, aren't there, that Reconomy must be involved in, that are saying that we're all taking it right up there in the top 3, and we'll get on with it. And that's why we're trying to do some of these platforms. We've got some of the universities involved, so that we actually gather proper data. Now, what platform it is, that's another question altogether.
I mean, sustainability is in BIM, isn't it?
It is.
If you want it. So we've got something there already to work on. Would that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. But for instance, we've had the ability to build a house and have plasterboard cut to size for 20 years, but people still get it delivered in 8x4 sheets and cut it down and then put that in a box over there to go away.
Yeah, but there are places that can deal with that if we're smart about it, and they're not being used generally. It's going off to landfill. But
I think here's the point. Graham's point is you need to get the entire supply chain involved to really make that work. So well, that's an obvious thing to say, but let's be clear, that means it's the client. So you firstly got to get the client to agree to the specification that will deliver some of those benefits. You've then got the design consultants, you've got to get them on board. You've got the tier one contractor, you've then got the dry lining contractor for a plasterboard, for example, and you've got to get him bought in. So we've got an exercise that we're operating with one of the other tier ones at the moment, and there's potentially some large savings as a result of exactly that, bespoke cut length boards. Their point, however, is that they're cautious about identifying what their savings might be until such time as they've got the dry lining contractor bought in, because ultimately it'll be him who will deliver those savings or not. Yeah? So you have to get everybody lined up all the way through the supply chain, which sounds onerous, but I think if you start small and really focus on it, it's doable, and increasingly it's doable if you've got the data. Yeah? So if you can prove that there was a pound note saving from using bespoke boards, and you can demonstrate that there was less waste taken off as a result, and you can identify, as you were saying, what that saving was as a result of that, then what you're into is the dry lining contractor identifying what productivity gains did he get from that on site. So there's a whole, it's very complex, but it's doable, and I think what Graham's saying is that I agree with that. There's an appetite for this now, more than there's ever been, yeah? and an opportunity. Yeah?
But there's a lot of if you can do this, if you can do that. So in other words, a lot of persuading, that takes a lot of people hours.
Yes.
In an industry which is traditionally conservative, probably quite adversarial, wanting to win contracts. That strikes me as being not a perfect environment for that collective effort. Unfair?
No, it is a fair point historically, Robin, but I think you'll find that the industry now is matured, and I think that the collaboration is at its highest level since I've been in the industry for over 30 years. And most of the top tier ones now are sharing this kind of information. Why? Because there are lots of other differentials that we can create now. This should be something that's a given. And I think that's why the initiatives are already starting to get off the ground. I think that we should go back to the digitisation piece though, because I don't know how many guys who actually deliver skips and pick up waste, but there's hundreds and hundreds of them. And I'm not trying to promote Reconomy as such, but there is a now need for that interim person to actually broker the service so that it takes some of the pain away from the main contractor. Because it's okay if you've got 4 or 5 big jobs, but if you've got a myriad, we've got a house builder called Lovell. Lovell have got 100 sites probably of their own. Mm-hmm. And it's a different type of waste. Mm-hmm. And so I think the broker has now got himself a place, and we should encourage the innovators and the start-up companies and say, help us, rather than you'll have to persuade us, if you get my drift.
I think Graham's point, 560 sites, was it, for Morgan's across, and that would literally be across the whole of the UK. So to service those from a waste perspective, you've got a hugely fragmented industry, some very small companies, some larger, but what we would be doing is aggregating that data, getting the consistency into that data. And until you do that, it's an impossible task to start to measure and manage. It's impossible. So having been promoting that for a long time now via our portal, etc., what we're recognising is the opportunity to start digitising other elements of that process. And that's why we're really excited. Your point is you've got to get people bought in, and therefore you've got to promote it. So that's why we're keen to do things like this. Let's promote the fact that if we get more people bought in and more people understanding the opportunities there, then I think the excitement level grows. Like Graham, I've been around this industry for 30 years. I've never known the appetite for this to be as great as it is now.
How much does your involvement, or the involvement of brokers or third parties, if you like, ease the problem of a company getting that message across at the sort of building site level? Because they've got 101 things to do to get that house up. If they've also got to be thinking about what they're doing with their waste, they're more likely to chuck it in a skip, and it's going to go off. That must be a challenge. However, you might have a big site, but you've still got to, the individual people, and it's a very labour-intensive industry. You've got to deal with people on the job on the day. Does that help that?
Absolutely, and I think the biggest barrier is how onerous it is at the moment to get it right, as opposed to the benefits or even the perceived benefits, because it's so easy to get it wrong. And as you say, people have other priorities, and it's at the moment more difficult to get it right than it should maybe. And hopefully with technology doing some of the checks that can be quite mundane, we can focus on the innovation aspect of things rather than on the checking and data entry and all that, if you agree. and definitely the focus should be on people's engagement, and absolutely agree with what you said before, Matt, about the whole value chain being involved, the client being presented the opportunities, the designers play a key role. And we at Multiplex we tend to hold workshops to bring everyone together, and we have a big library of ideas that we've used before and trying to see what applies, what doesn't apply. But then I think where the next barrier is, then we all have great ideas, we all agree it has to be done, it should be done, it makes sense economically, sustainability wise and so on. It doesn't actually happen, and I think the solution can only be digitalization again, to start to understand why it's not happening. Where it's not happening is probably it's too difficult. So hopefully we should then focus on those areas to try and make sustainability being the easy option.
Simon, digitization is actually very wide-ranging. I mean, we've been looking particularly at waste. I think perhaps a little diversion. I mean, there's all sorts of other digital ways that can impact in the construction industry, and that's what you're doing as well. I mean, it's not just talking about the waste here. So what are some of the other key areas where the industry needs to embrace the digital future?
So the long-term vision is obviously to shift the way that buildings are constructed, to help drive the waste out through that way, to making it more controlled, more accurate designs, and designs that can be manufactured rather than assembled. Assembled on site, I should say. One of the ways that digitisation is being adopted in the industry is through the use of BIM. That tends to be in the design phase. But even BIM data does not necessarily include the packaging information of the products as they arrive on site. BIM objects are very good at describing the dimensions, the materials of a particular fitting, let's say, of a building component, but they're not so good at describing how that's going to get to site and what packaging it's going to arrive in. But once a company has gone through the initial hurdle of adopting some digital standards and adopting a digital way of working through their processes, it then becomes a lot easier to bring in new methods, so methods to track and identify where materials are, what materials are being used, and what excess material is going to result at the end of a program. Once that's there, then of course it becomes a lot easier to present that to the market. And I think what we need to approach here is to be able to package up the information of what is becoming available to the market, and the business community, if they know that a particular material is becoming available at quantity on a particular date at a particular site, then that can be used to make money. They can find a way to recycle that, to reuse it, turn it back into a raw material. And to find a value chain within that. At the moment, we don't necessarily have that value chain because the industry is not controlled in a way. We don't know what is coming out of the site, so we can't control it.
Still, there are a number of startups that we're starting to collaborate to do exactly that. And hopefully we will do more and more on that, because we try to always give something back to society. So, okay, if something went wrong in a way and there was some unavoidable waste, at least we want to try and give back either to social enterprises or for other good causes, educational or other.
This agenda will not be driven by just waste alone.
No.
So the carbon issue is still huge, particularly in our industry. And I think that with the exclusion zone being expanded in London, with Birmingham, Manchester and Oxford all signed up, and I understand a couple of other cities, the logistics piece will become significant to impact on all of the construction process. So the waste piece will be part of that driver. So that's why it's become really pertinent to get on now. I can't stress how urgent we need to move. Because there's lots to do, which is why we need to do it together.
Excellent. Well, we're getting towards the end, and I think this is a good opportunity to ask each of you in turn if perhaps the thing that we've discussed today that you're going to take away might actually have an impact in what you're doing tomorrow. One would hope. So, Matt, what have you gained from today?
I guess from our point of view, what I would say is we're pretty clear on the direction that we would want to go. What's been discussed during the course of the panel today is how do we, what are the practical steps to going about that? Graham's point is, or one of Graham's points is, well, select a geography, and within that geography it's a more manageable process to start to do these things and then prove it out, demonstrate that it works. So if anything, that's the thing that I would take away and be saying to the Graham and Eva and the likes, okay, well, let's get those initiatives driven forward. And I know that requires the whole industry to do that, but interestingly there's aspects of the industry that are already involved in those initiatives, so I have some optimism about that coming to fruition.
So it's a strategic benefit in a way you've had.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Eva?
I would like to think the future as being a future with no waste and future with no excess carbon. So this is the decisions that we are trying to take today to bring that about in the future, as you were saying, and hopefully the future will bring about much more wider collaboration, to pick up on Graham's point, and putting things back into society, I think, is going to be a massive driver, improving everyone's quality of life, everyone's health, everyone's safety and well-being in total.
You mentioned the circular economy earlier on, and from what you just said, I can't imagine any individual agency in this can have a circular economy unless there is collaboration and people working together. So I think that fits nicely.
Yeah.
Graham?
Actually, I'm quite excited by it. I think there's a tremendous opportunity. And I think for me, to listen to other people like-minded, that if we just keep at it, but probably increase the pace and be a little bit more agile, it's an exciting time for construction because we can set the pace.
Thank you very much. Well, there you go. They all want your help, and you're happy.
Excellent.
And you're happy to help. So, what have you learned, if you like?
So, it's been fantastic hearing some of the initiatives that are going on, on the sites at the moment. I think for businesses who are tuned in, listening to this, the time to act is now. If you do not act, I think you'll probably find your competitors already have, and they may be sitting here today. But also, it will become increasingly difficult to do things through the traditional means, because there is increasing pressure on resources, on waste, on recyclability, and particularly waste going to landfill. So the old way of doing things is going to get much harder. You mentioned about the low emission zones affecting the ability for waste carriers to move in and out of heavily populated areas. So the pressures are coming from all sides. They're coming through the government procurement methods that we're hoping to see will change, and they're coming through the legislation around waste that is potentially coming through. So there is going to be some funding available for this. There's already some fantastic organisations that people can collaborate with, and particularly to collaborate with some universities as well. So there's a great resource out there in the UK to help make this happen. So keen to see people get involved.
Thank you very much. I've been struck actually about how timely it feels that we're having this discussion today. And you mentioned off-site design and bringing buildings in, and before today I was looking through something I hadn't come across before actually, which was a House of Lords Select Committee report on the benefits of off-site, and there was I thought a very pertinent quote from Professor Jennifer White, who's Director of the Centre for Systems Engineering and Innovation at Imperial College. And she said, "You cannot change technologies of production without changing business and procurement models." And I thought that was quite a good summary. So I just want to share. That was my contribution. You've all given me yours. So thank you all for what you've brought to the event today, and from Reconomy for making it happen. Thank you very much. And for Construction News, I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.